Is John Vervaeke losing it?
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So last time we were taking a look at the centrality of relevance realization, how many central processes, central to our intelligence, possibly also to our, at least the functionality of our consciousness, presuppose, require, are dependent upon relevance realization.
Did you get all that?
So we had gotten to a point where we saw how many things fed into this, and then made the argument that it is probably at some fundamental level a unified phenomena because it comports well with the phenomena of general intelligence, which is a very robust and reliable finding about human beings. And then I proposed to you that what we need to do is two things. We need to try and give a naturalistic account of this, and then show if we have naturalized this, can we then use it in an elegant manner to explain a lot of the central features of human spirituality.
1 minute down. Is there a point to this?
And I already indicated in the last lecture how some of that was already being strongly suggested. We got an account of self-transcendence that comes out of dynamic emergence that is being created by the ongoing complexification. And this has to do with the very nature of relevance realization as this ongoing, evolving fittedness of your sensory motor loop to its environment under the virtual engineering of bioeconomic logistical constraints of efficiency that tend to compress and integrate and assimilate, and resiliency that tend to particularize and differentiate. And when those are happening in such a dynamically coupled and integrated fashion within an ongoing opponent processing, then you get complexification that produces self-transcendence. But of course, much more is needed.
2 minutes wasted. What are we even talking about?
Now, I would like to proceed to address, now I can't do this comprehensively, not in a way that would satisfy everybody who's potentially watching this. This is very difficult because there are aspects of this argument that would get incredibly technical. Also, to make the argument comprehensive is beyond what I think I have time to do here today. I'll put notes for things that you can read. I'll point you to if you want to read it more deeply. What I want to do is try to give an exemplary argument, an example of how you could try and bring about a plausible, naturalistic account of relevance realization. Now, we've gone a long way towards doing that because we've already got this worked out in terms of
Wrong. 3 minutes in, and we've gotten nowhere.
Information processing processes. But could we see them potentially realized in the brain? And one more time, I want to advertise for the brain. I understand why people want to resist the urge of sort of a simplistic reduction that human beings are nothing but their brain. That's a very bad way of talking. That's like saying a table is nothing but its atoms. That doesn't ultimately make any sense. It's also the structural functional organization of the atoms, the way that structural functional organization interacts with the world, how it unfolds through time. So simplistic reductionism should definitely be questioned. On the other hand, we also have to appreciate how incredibly complex, dynamic, self-creating, plastic, capable of very significant qualitative development the brain actually is.
4 minutes in, this is your brain on Vervaeke.
So, propose to you that you can, one aspect of relevance realization, the aspect that has to do with trading between, being able to generalize and specialize, as I've argued, is a system going through compression. Remember, that's something like what you're doing with line of best fit and particularization, when your function is more tightly fitted to the contextually specific data set. And again, this gives you efficiency, this gives you resiliency, this tends to integrate and assimilate, this tends to differentiate and accommodate. Okay, so try to keep that all in mind. Now what I want to try and do is argue that there is suggestive. It's by no means definitive, and I want it clearly understood that I am not proposing to prove anything here. That's not my endeavor. My endeavor is to show that there is suggestive evidence for something, and all I need is that that makes it plausible that there will be a way to empirically explain relevance realization.
5 minutes in, hasn't clearly explained a thing.
So, let's talk about what this looks like. So there's increasing evidence that when neurons fire in synchrony together, they're doing something like compression. So if you give, for example, somebody a picture that they can't quite make out, and you're looking at how the brain is firing, the areas of the visual cortex, for example, if it's a visual picture, are firing sort of asynchronously, and then when the person gets it and go, aha, you get large areas that fire in synchrony together. Interestingly, there's even increasing evidence that when human beings are cooperating in joint attention and joint activity, their brains are getting into patterns of synchrony. So that opens up the possibility for a very serious account of distributed cognition. I'll come back to that much later. Now, what we know what's going on in the cortex, right, and this is the point that's I think very important. This is scale invariant. What that means is at many levels of analysis, you will see this process happening. Why is that important? Well, if you remember, relevance realization has to be something that's happening very locally, very globally. It has to be happening pervasively throughout all of your cognitive processing. So the fact that this process I'm describing is also scale invariant in the brain is suggestive that it can be implementing relevance realization.
Okay, now what happens is at many levels of analysis, what you have is, right, you have this pattern where neurons are firing in synchrony, and then they become asynchronous, and then they fire in synchrony, and then they become asynchronous, and they're doing this in a rapidly oscillating manner. So this is an instance of what's called self-organizing criticality. It's a particular kind of opponent processing, a particular kind of self-organization. So we're getting more precision in our account of the self-organizing nature, potentially of relevance realization. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this first, and then we'll come back to its particular instantiation in the brain. So self-organizing criticality, this goes originally back to the work of Vervaeke. So let's say you have grains of sand falling, like in an hourglass.
Like sands through the hourglass.
So are the days of our lives.
Did you enjoy this lecture? What did you get out of it? You're lying if you say you got anything useful.